Welcome everyone who joined. We'll just give a couple of minutes for people to join in because there are people joining in across the globe. And for some people, it's pretty early in the morning, and for some, it's pretty late in the night. So just give them a couple of minutes for them to join. Okay. As expected, we hit 120 plus. So we are just starting. Uh, Welcome everyone. Good morning to people from US, Middle East, and Africa. Good afternoon to the ones in India, and good evening to the ones in APAC and further east. Thank you for joining this. I hope we make it really interesting for you today in this session on intelligent warfare and how AI is reshaping cyber threats. It wouldn't be a better time given that there has been so much of chatter on AI and how modball coming in and how agents speaking to agents can really change what is going to happen in the world of AI. Everyone has beaten down the stocks of tech companies, but I think some of the cybersecurity companies should actually see an uptick, given that when all this happens, there is going to be a need for increased cyber defense. And that's what we are going to talk about today, that how do all of us as customers, as system integrators, or as advisors deal in this new world of AI impacting cybersecurity too, right? I am going to be your host for the day. I'm Samir. I am the Chief Business Officer at Synergy Technologies. We deal in network security as well as endpoint security. And I have spent many years and seen the transformation of telecom, transformation of cybersecurity, and how we came from traditional stateful firewalls and a pure antivirus on a machine was good enough, to now where there are a myriad of solutions, but you're not really still sure if we are protected. New acronyms of the three-letter or four-letter kind keep popping up. We saw EDR, then we hear XDR, and the list of acronyms just keeps growing. And we don't even know often that if there is a common standard, which means what someone calls XDR and what another vendor calls XDR, is it the same? And then we have governments all across the world coming with data privacy norms, endpoint detection norms, and in some way or the other, norms for AI, all of which adds further confusion to everyone in the system. We are going to today speak of some of these elements because it's a vast field, but we'll try to touch upon three or four key areas that are happening in the space of cybersecurity and AI. We'll talk about dark web, the intelligence of dark web, the vulnerabilities that dark web opens. We are going to talk of new attack tools using the likes of Worm GPT and AI-enabled LLMs. We'll talk of deepfakes because that's a hot topic on how deepfakes can be used as a tool, an effective tool for social engineering. And we are going to finally speak of the the key in the room, which is quantum security, right? Everyone's hearing that quantum security is an issue, and we're going to talk a little bit on quantum security. I'm joined today by two eminent co-hosts. One is Sachin Deodar, and you know that image suits him aptly. He's an active threat hunter. He's someone who's worked a lot with the government of India in our defense organizations, in our spy agencies, and has an extensive experience of cyber espionage. So he's going to be speaking about a lot on these attack matrices, on state-sponsored attacks as well as attacks on enterprises. He's currently an advisor, an independent advisor to several organizations globally, both enterprises, governments, banks, telcos, aerospace, and defense. So that's going to be Sachin, who's going to speak about attack vectors and how the attack side of things work. I also have with me Sajeev Nair. who's the CTO, CIO of ESDS Software. And Sajeev, that's Sajeev on the right in his younger days. So don't go by what you see on the left. He's the purple team. He's going to speak on the defense. He's going to speak on how, as we move from private data centers and applications to cloud, how the cloud side of things can be protected and defended in the age of AI. He brings a diverse experience of, again, having worked across cybersecurity space, and he's seen it evolve over the past 20, 30 years. And so he's going to speak on that. I am going to pull them both in a conversation, but I'm just going to lay the foundation of what we are going to speak over here with a simple yet powerful case that happened recently. Um, Late 2024, there was an attack on a European logistics company. The attack was done using something called Darkbot. Now, Darkbot attack was interesting because it was an LLM, but it was not your chat GPT who is extremely polite, says please, and nice knowing you, and so on and so forth. Darkbot was actually trained on 2 terabytes plus of dark web data, right? And it was actually trained to basically not do the traditional attack vectors of scanning your firewalls, which would raise signals of anomaly. It actually scanned underground forums for leaked data, for threads, for information that it could gather on your network on the dark web. And by doing this, it identified a minor supplier of this logistics company and found his leaked credentials in some Russian language forum, which were, by the way, a year and a half old. However, they had not been reset. This is the vulnerability that he used to then get into the network, use it as a zero-day exploit on an ODU, an outdoor gateway unit. And that was being discussed on a Telegram channel. So now you see the attack vector, the spread of his recon, right? He's basically gone to dark web, looked at leaked credentials in a foreign language, monitored Telegram channels, and done all of this to hack into the network without any traditional mechanisms that are used for breaching a network. No firing pings, no going into your firewalls, raising anomalies, none of that. And more interestingly, all of this would have taken, I wrote 3 weeks, but it would have taken months for a traditional attacker to do, was done in 15 minutes, right, for them. And the entire attack was executed without ever having touched your traditional firewall attacking mechanisms, right? So the attack part was mapped without touching your network. That is the sophistication and the power of a modern AI based threats that we are facing today, right? With this, I would like to welcome Sachin and Sajeev in to throw light on this example, to look at the attack chain. And we have been used to the attack framework. Uh, is the attack framework redundant in the age of AI? Is it something that needs to be modified? Sachin, over to you. Maybe you may want to add to your introduction if I missed something, but I know you have a rich experience, and then comment on this case and the attack and kill chain.
Okay, thanks, Samir, for the introduction and also setting the context via this example. This is a very illustrative, very interesting example, right? It illustrates how artificial intelligence is aiding threat actors in very non-traditional, unorthodox, non-standard ways. But to answer your question, I do not think that the MITRE ATT&CK framework, the one that the industry standard, the reference framework that everyone uses as a taxonomy to describe different types of attack tactics, techniques, and procedures, I think that is still preserved and it is still extremely relevant because regardless of the techniques, the mechanisms, the tools that the attackers use, AI or non-AI based, what is invariant is the necessity for the attackers to go through several key stages of the attack kill chain to achieve their objectives. They must find a way in, they must find a way to persist, they must find a way to escalate their privileges and permissions once inside your network. They must be able to map your network. They must be able to find your crown jewels. Then they must be able to gain dominance on your network and then use this dominant position of authority and privilege to actually subvert or sabotage or exfiltrate data from your network. So that remains invariant. And that is precisely what the MITRE ATT&CK framework describes in the form of tactics, which is the kill chain stages. And then vertically, it describes the techniques to achieve each of those tactics or goals inside the kill chain. And then, of course, you have the sub techniques and so on, which talk about the details of how that particular technique is implemented. So, no, I don't think that the attack framework becomes irrelevant. However, the tactics, techniques, and while tactics remain the same, the techniques and the sub techniques, especially those that are aided by AI, uh, you could argue that they are now different, right? Different yet similar. So what it means for the MITRE ATT&CK framework is that I think the MITRE organization, the American organization that maintains this framework, needs to start looking at a MITRE attack for AI-assisted threats. So that will look a little different than so you might want to bring in the AI flavor in terms of the AI-assisted techniques and how those techniques and articulate those techniques inside the framework, which is currently absent. I mean, this has been done before. I mean, MITRE has created, and initially they only had a framework for enterprise network threats at TTPs. So we call it MITRE ATT&CK Enterprise. And then we also have MITRE ATT&CK Cloud, and we have MITRE ATT&CK for OT, for SCADA and DCS and OT systems. So they have done this before. So there's a precedent. So they could create, potentially, they're already working on something which is MITRE ATT&CK for AI, for example, if the framework for AI. Now, what I want to show the audience here, unfortunately, it's not an interactive audience because I can't hear them and they can hear me, but I can't hear them back, right? But still, I'm going to share my screen and I want to show one slide. And I would like for people to ponder over this slide and I'll describe what the slide actually is afterwards. And I think that will bring home the point in a very visceral way as to what this is
Sure.
actually. Let me know once you
By the
can
way,
see.
during the session, Sachin, during the session, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat window. We will pick up some of the questions and respond, and of course, we'll have a Q&A at the end.
Yeah, in
Sorry,
fact,
Sachin,
I
go
will
ahead.
ask the questions verbally because everybody can hear me, right? So
Sure.
I hope everyone can see the slide that is in front of you. Do you see the slide, Samir?
Yes, yes, I can see it. Yeah.
You can
Yes,
see the
yes, we can
slide, and
see.
I'm sure the rest of the participants can. Now, I would like people to take a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, to look at this slide and start to, maybe draw some inferences and let me know what you think this slide might be. What might it depict? And I can tell you that this is an example, a very sinister example of an AI-assisted attack. Firstly, it's clear.
Everyone can put their responses in the chat window. You can just type out in the chat window.
Yeah. The participants can type the response in the chat window. Have you seen this before? If you have seen this before, I am surprised and impressed. But if you haven't seen this before, that's not surprising. Let me give you a clue. If there are any healthcare professionals or doctors in the room, they might recognize this set of images. So, in the interest of time, let me go ahead and start to demystify this image a little bit. This image is basically images of CT scans, 3D scans. So these are 2D images of 3D scans taken of patients who are suspected to have lung cancer. And these, to be very specific, these are little crops. They are not the entire image. They are little crops of images of the lungs of these patients. And if you see that they're pairs of images. So you see injection has two columns and removal has two columns. So let's focus on injection. Within the injection column, you see two pairs of images, left and right, and so on, in four different rows. And if you notice qualitatively, if you see the left-hand side image of each pair, you see there is no white blob. But in the right-hand side image, you see a white mass, which appears to be a tumor. And that is the case for all of the images. If you see the right side image will contain a blob or a mass and the left side image does not. Now, the clue is in the word injection. What has been done here is that the attackers have actually used artificial intelligence, a technique called in-painting technique, using neural networks to inject the image of a tumor inside the CT scan of an otherwise healthy patient or otherwise healthy person. And in the case of the removal, now you can probably imagine what those images are. The left-hand side image contains a white mass and the right-hand side image does not. So these are patients with cancer that should have been diagnosed as patients with cancer. But the artificial intelligence malware has removed excised the tumor from the 3D scan image, the CT scan image, and it makes it appear as if these patients are healthy, that there is no evidence of a tumor. Now you might wonder that this could, this is not going to fool anyone, right? But however, let me now explain the background to this. This was done by a joint team in the government between the Indian government, my team in the government. So just for the background, I was the joint secretary in the Indian Cabinet Secretariat. Some of you know it as a foreign intelligence service of the Indian government. So we worked on a very confidential at that point in time, a project with the Israel government, and we collaborated on a project together to figure out, would it be possible to have a lightweight AI agent that would intercept CT scan images that are generated on the CT scan machine, transmitted via the hospital's network to the radiologist's machine, intercept them, man in the middle attack, intercept the image, find out if there's a tumor or not. If there's a tumor, remove it. If there's no tumor, insert it in a way that fools even the world's best radiologists and oncologists. So we were successful in executing this attack. We were able to do so by the help of an generative AI. So basically a type of generative AI, but not the type that we are used to in ChatGPT. But this one uses two pairs of neural networks. It's a bit technical, but essentially what we were able to do is realize this in a simple piece of hardware, which is a Raspberry Pi, which is around a device this big with very limited compute power. So the training of the algorithm was done elsewhere, but ultimately, once the algorithm was ready, it was implemented on a small piece of hardware. We inserted it in the middle of the night in the hospital's network. We were able to perform the man-in-the-middle attack, intercept the images on the DICOM network in the hospital, and then perform the manipulation. And then we presented these sets of images, 5,000 images, to around a panel of 70 doctors across the world, some of the world's most eminent experts, and 96% of those experts did not detect the manipulation. And in the second part of the exercise, we approached another 75 doctors, but this time around, we told them that there was a possibility that some of these images were manipulated, but we did not tell them which images were manipulated. In this case, 86% of them were fooled. And these are the world's best doctors that you can imagine from across the world, across different countries and hospital networks. So I just wanted to give you this example to say, how far can AI go in terms of being used in a malicious way? This could be used for assassinations. It could be used for disrupting the healthcare system in an entire country, to create distrust in the system. I mean, this is a critical infrastructure attack, right, on the heart of the healthcare sector. And if this can be done by a bunch of buffoons like us sitting working for a few weeks and then going to another country and working with another team and doing this within, like, we were able to finish this all in 3 months. So the attackers have far more resources than some of us imagine. So I just
Sachin,
I would bit of a
you're effectively telling me, so Sachin, you're effectively telling me what we see in a lot of Mission Impossible movies, where the
this
images
is
are
real.
created and the
Yeah,
CCTV
this is
footage.
real. This
This is
is real
really
data.
happening.
Okay, I got the permission from our
Yeah.
government to release one slide, which I was able to show you. But this is because there is no
Awesome.
context to it, right? There's no patient information. I'm not violating any privacy norms. Neither am I telling you who the actual
Yeah.
was or when it
But
was done.
this is interesting. And as you say, if this is what you can do, I wouldn't call the team buffoons, but I can really say that if you can do this in 3 weeks in a hospital, what can we then do in terms of other infra? A lot of other infra, which is
And let me tell you,
open
this
exposed.
technique did not require any research and development. It was done with
Yeah,
open
and
source. Open source on
so
open
there's a
source
question.
hardware. And the technique that we used is the same technique that many of us use today when we use Adobe Photoshop. or any of the editing software. Because when we remove distraction, or when we remove an unnecessary person from an image, or when we add an item, object to an image, right, one of our photographs, because it makes it look better, we are actually using the same technique.
Yeah.
We are
So
using
there's a
generative
question,
structure.
Sachin, there's a question, interesting question, that while the doctors did not detect this, the trained doctors, but is there a footprint that is left when the image is inserted or removed such that an algorithm can detect it?
Perfect. So this is this C3T. Okay, we may be digressing, but I'll give a very short answer. Uh, this particular image is stored in a proprietary format called DICOM format, DICOM, in a hospital network. Right now, when this image is stored in the DICOM format, the DICOM format supports various security features like digital signature, encryption. In most hospital networks, if people are being entirely honest here, almost no hospital in the world today implements many of these features, even though they are present. There are
Okay.
watermarking features, there are integrity tampering tamper check features. If to some of these features were implemented, some of these attacks would either not been possible or would have been possible to detect after the fact. Unfortunately, as per our assumptions, even the hospital we tested did not implement those features. And so just like today we are struggling with detection of AI generated content, right? Many companies, many social media companies, many even Adobe Photoshop, for example, is trying to find out, is there a way to detect when AI has been used to manipulate an image, right? Especially in deepfakes, to detect deepfakes. At the moment, there is no industry or a global standard which is interoperable, which everyone has agreed to use. Adobe has introduced something called the Content Authenticity Initiative, CAI, which has been implemented by certain camera manufacturers and certain photo editors, but that is in a very limited domain. So it will be at least a decade before everybody agrees on a common protocol, and first of all agrees that there is a need to detect AI-based content. And the reason why they are not agreeing is because there is a business case to be made for using AI for a lot of these. So that, you don't, they are averse to implementing these types of integrity
So
checking.
basically, so basically, Sachin, you're saying that even an algorithm today could not have detected these injections or
No,
no?
no,
Okay.
no. Because we trained our program, our general CGANs, the neural networks, on almost a half a billion, 500 million sets of images which we had access to. And by the way, this is not something that requires special access. A lot of these images are available from data brokers, from people who develop medical software, imaging software. So this data is available. So we did not have any special access just because we were government. So
Very
anyway, let's get back to let's get back to the talk about cyber. So no,
sure.
the attack
No, but
framework
it's
is
interesting.
relevant.
So yeah, but it is very interesting. I mean, if you could stop sharing, I think you touched upon the next
Yes.
topic that we are going to talk about. So let me share. And but it's interesting that you spoke about how some of the other methods are being used to kind of basically Shirish, you need to allow me to share again. I can't seem to. Yeah, okay, I got it. Okay. So basically, some of the other methods that are being used to kind of create the same cyber attack framework, right? Over here. So for example,
Samir,
yeah,
as I never got to that, but essentially, if you look at the key stages of the attack kill chain, right?
yeah,
At every stage of the attack kill chain, artificial intelligence in its many forms and manifestations does play a role. Like, let's
yeah,
take a simple example. We want to gain initial access to the network, right? What are the traditional? There are two vectors that people often use to get initial access to the network. One is by scanning the external attack surface, finding out your vulnerable assets, exploitable vulnerable assets, that little subset, and then attempting to exploit those assets and gaining a foothold, and then hope and pray that you can then get inside the network, because it's not always possible. You may remain on the outside and you may never find a pivot mechanism to come inside the network. But let's assume that you can, then you can do it. That's a viable way. The other way, which is more common, 75% of the cases involve phishing in some form or the other, using various
correct.
filters, audio, video, media, etc., etc. Right? Email being one of them. Now, within phishing, also you have the means to phish for credentials using a simple email with a link inside, or perhaps directly get a foothold in the form of a malware implant on one of the machines by file format exploit, which is essentially sending an attachment to someone. The attachment is a malicious attachment. The attacker is convinced, the victim is convinced to open the attachment. Once the attachment opens, magically there is a backdoor on that machine, and the attacker outside has control over that machine, and then moving forward, possibly access the entire network. So in this particular attack stage, right, the initial stage, initial access stage, the gathering of intelligence, organizational intelligence, employee intelligence, email addresses, which used to be done manually or semi-automatically with human operators doing a lot of grunt work and spending sometimes weeks on gathering this intelligence, which would then allow them to craft certain emails with a certain pretext, which will hopefully be convincing enough for somebody to open. And then they can only do a so much finite amount of work because they have a small number of human operators, and then sending them off in a phishing campaign and waiting for the results. And then based on the results, going further in the kill chain. Now, all of this can not only be automated, but you can also task AI agents to do this. And this is not fantasy. This is something that's already being done. By this, you can increase both the scale in terms of the number of victims that you can target, victim organizations you can target in any given finite period of time, as well as the sophistication in terms of how convincing those email pretexts are, how temporally contextual those email pretexts are, and how specific to that organization those email pretexts are. Because we have a common saying when I was in the government, we used to have a saying, there is a patch for hardware, there is a patch for software, but unfortunately, there is no patch for human stupidity. And that is what the attackers are relying on.
That's
Because
an
there is
interesting
no
one.
patch for human stupidity, people are unfortunately, they are vulnerable to social enginering attacks.
And
And AI
that's
allows
where
you to do this with greater scale and sophistication than ever before. One guy can do things as much as 15 guys would do in 1 month. And
correct. And
that's
that's what
just
brings
one
us to
thing.
the Sachin, that's what brings us to the next one, which you rightly said. I wouldn't still call it human stupidity because they are not necessarily stupid, but
I
they're
would
tricked
like
into
to
it.
step in here. I would like to step in here, Samir.
Yeah,
So I was
Sachin.
patiently
Yeah,
listening.
Sachin.
And thank you. First of all, thanks for the introduction, Samir. And Sachin, you started off with a very valid point that from an attack perspective, nothing is changing, right? So typically, the fear that with AI the world is going to change and everything is going to be upside down is not something which we all agree. Majorly, what is not changing is the attack methodology or the MITRE attack framework or the way somebody gets into your environment. So even if somebody has to do an AI attack, he still needs to follow the same methods. So typically the basics don't change here. So for example, when we start look about or you talk about ensuring security, you start with basic assessment. Like it applies to countries, it applies to companies, it applies to any infrastructure that you build. You do something known as a risk posturing or risk attack. So going from the other side, now if I have to look at it like a blue team, or if I have to look at it like somebody who's trying to defend against an attacker, obviously a police has to think like a criminal to stop a criminal. Here we are talking about, first of all, you have to look at who could be your potential attackers. What are you protecting against? What is your risk, risk framework? Typically, are they countries? Are there people? Are there competition? Who's going to attack you? Now, based on that, what type of effort you're going to stop, what you're going to live with, what you're going to not mitigate or transfer. So, multiple of these things go into that. Apart from that, we are talking about putting in the right architecture. Now, based on that, will you just need a firewall to stop at the perimeter level? Are you looking at an IPS to add to that? Are you looking at fraud detection systems to add to that? Are you having a WAF with a OWASP, addressing vulnerabilities like that? Are you looking at, putting in the right antivirus, the EDRs, DLPs, the PAM systems in place? So all of these have their, relevance in today's world as well, even with AI coming in. Secondly, we are saying there are two parts, like they say in security, right? Either you know you're hacked or you don't know you're hacked, right? So detection. So one is that, preventing an attack. So where we talk about stopping something, where we are talking, and everything, even when we are talking about privacy, India also implemented its own standards for privacy similar to GDPR, which is the DPDPA. So again, that talks about not only privacy as a core of your infrastructure as your fundamentals, but it also talks about data protection or data security as a core of your fundamentals. So here we are saying that monitoring something, detecting something in the right time, and ensuring that you are reacting to the incident management piece. So there is an end-to-end piece available here. So similarly, just like AI or just like a gun can be used to hunt and feed you, it can be used to kill somebody. Similarly, AI is a tool which can be used both ways. It can be used to attack. It can also be used to defend. Where I see the basics coming in here, like obviously you don't need AI to have basic social engineering, mannerism built in into the organization or the entity under scrutiny, right? Or you do not need AI to think about the different aspects of the kill chain per se, and look at how you can defend each of the kill chain per se. So as I said, if you talk about infiltration, like the example which Sachin talked about, so this comes at a stage where you have actually infiltrated into your environment, and you are talking about AI now making changes, which is very difficult to detect. So here
Correct.
we are not talking about, it's like an onion, right? You cannot look at security as one fits all. You will have to look at it like different layers of security. You cross one layer, and by the time you hit the other layer, you get caught, right? Or the third layer, you get caught. And AI would help us bridge all of these layers together. So as I mentioned, if you talk about layers of security, there are millions and millions of components which comes in when we are talking about security. So everything, and not everybody needs all of them, depending on the security
In
posture
fact,
of the organization. Yeah. Sorry, Sachin. Please go
no,
on.
no, no. I just to respond to something that you were just mentioning, right?
Sure,
You're
sure,
absolutely right.
sure.
Artificial intelligence is both a threat and an opportunity, right?
Correct.
In fact, the security industry is responding really well to essentially leveraging artificial intelligence as an opportunity. So, for example, like one of the biggest, so I work as an advisor with various large critical infrastructure organizations, especially financial services, and which are under a constant threat. Now, in financial services, security operations is a very intimidating domain because and incident management life cycle also life cycle management is also very it's a very intimidating domain because it's very hard to staff, it's very hard to resource, there are a myriad of solutions that play a role in the incident management process, from detection, monitoring, detection to response. AI and specifically Copilot enabled solutions today allow you to have lesser skilled, not necessarily, I would say, lesser experienced resources interact in human language terms with extremely technical
Absolutely.
data with the aid of these co-pilots. And rather than having to learn some esoteric query language, which is associated with a one specific EDR solution like XQL for Palo Alto Cortex, I can ask today's next generation SIM from Palo Alto Cortex, for example, XIM, like, hey, show me all of the network connections that originated in Russia and
Absolutely.
in the last
Correct.
24 hours
Absolutely.
with this
Absolutely.
protocol directed towards my web application firewall or my reverse proxy,
Absolutely.
which and where the bytes in exceeded bytes out by more than 2.5 standard deviations. Now, this is something that would have
Correct.
required a very complex query or a rule to be written and a threat hunting to be done.
In the
Now,
past,
you
yes.
ask the ask the question and you get a response back, and then you can drill down into the response. So I think that's one area where AI is helping. The other area, of course,
Yeah.
is in detection space. Detection of very advanced, complex TTPs. Just as attackers are using artificial intelligence to create adaptive malware, these advanced next generation platforms are now using artificial intelligence from a detection perspective. Something as simple as regression technique all the way to neural networks and unsupervised learning and everything in between. So I think, yeah.
Correct. So that's interesting, Sachin. So that's interesting.
Uh,
One take.
it's sorry, I'm jumping the gun here, Samir, because it's a very interesting topic, and I'm
Yeah.
not able to hold myself back here. So,
Yeah.
very interesting point which Sachin did mention, and which he has put on the table here, is that now it has become very easy to become an attacker. what would have been required years of research, study, having to go
Correct.
through a lot of,
Correct.
being attached to a lot of forums, now becomes very easy with AI. So tomorrow, today, what was
Correct.
less relevant from a security standpoint, people would say, hey, it's not needed for me to be that secure. The guy who's putting so much effort would probably target a big bank or target somebody,
Yeah,
bigger, like,
exactly.
defense organization is now going to say, hey, no, the kid next door can also hack me, right? So let me have
And
that
Sajid,
iron
that's
door.
a
Let
that's
me
a
have the right layer of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
Samir,
very
please
I
go.
mean,
that's a very
see,
interesting point.
AI
That's a
has
very interesting point, and
democratized.
that's what I was actually coming to. That sorry, Sachin, just a sec. So that's what I was coming to. That I have often seen in the market that SMBs or medium scale enterprises often feel, oh, no one's going to target me, and that's true with medium
Exactly.
sized banks, but that's especially true in non-banking and non-finance sector, right? Like coffee shops
Absolutely.
or digital chains or logistics companies. They feel, oh, who's going to hack me, and what will they get by hacking me? But as we have seen hospitals, Sachin, that example was brilliant because hospitals, I think, are today at the worst end of having security because they feel like I don't deal really with money, right? That's a payment gateway is the only thing that comes close to money, and that's someone else's problem, not my problem, the bank's problem or the payment gateway's problem. But you rightfully have highlighted that it is not really sector dependent, and just because you're a BFSI or an insurance player doesn't mean that you need security, but you need security irrespective of who you are, because as Sajeev said, it becomes so easy to hack into it. The sophisticated guys may go for BFSI, but the unsophisticated player would say, you know what, it's easy, I will just go hack a coffee shop, and if I can make even 10,000 bucks of it, why not, right? So it's going to become
And adding to that,
that's going to
the
become one another
information,
problem.
and
That
maybe the
yeah,
information you get from a coffee shop could be posted on dark web
yeah,
and used by somebody else to create a
yeah,
fake account.
Right. So,
exactly.
I think
Very interesting. Yes,
what AI
right.
is really
So
doing, I think, Samir, what I think we can sum it up by saying that AI has essentially democratized access to malware and malware development techniques, which has lowered the barrier of entry
correct,
for even novice hackers and little small groups which are not
Exactly.
well coordinated. Uh,
correct.
this is borne out by evidence. If you look at the last 2 years or 3 years, look at the steep rise in the number of ransomware attacks against mid-sized and small-sized organizations, not necessarily large targets. Many of these organizations I haven't even ever heard of. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
they're the victims of ransomware attack. And people who believe that ransomware requires its own different style of readiness, I don't agree. It is the exact
That's
same that you require for thwarting any cyber attack. It's just the end game in this
absolutely.
case happens to be ransomware execution. The
correct.
end goal
So
is
typically, I
sabotage.
agree with Sachin. Like, what we typically tend to focus is on the after effect, and they, based on that, decide the seriousness of the crime. But the crime is same. Probably what the effect that we see, for example, loss of money, monetary loss, or you talk about reputation loss, somewhere makes people look at one superior to the other. But at the end of the day, it all indicates that some basics were left out, right? Where,
Yeah,
yes, the techniques may vary, like Sachin started off by saying, the framework per se, even for an attacker, does not change. The techniques do vary. And if you have the right framework from a defensive strategy point of view, depending on your risk poster, depending on what you're looking at, obviously, that possibility, I would never say certainty because there is nothing called as certainty in security, right? This, because attack vectors keep changing and you need to adapt to different attack vectors. But then the certainty or the chances or the possibility of attacking or stopping an attacker increases when you have the right defensive framework in place based on your security posture.
Yeah, I think,
correct.
Sajid, I think it's important to also look at the psychological aspect of it. The reason why ransomware
Absolutely.
causes is kind of amplified in people's minds, and they invest a lot in ransomware, even if it is no different than looking at mitigating other types of cyber threats, is because ransomware actually you people have a visceral response to ransomware because it actually involves subterfuge, sabotage, sometimes kinetic damage to some of their systems and networks, right? Which is less, it's more in your face than when you lose money, or even better, when your customers lose money. which is even
Exactly.
one more degree of separation far removed from you, right? But when your
Correct.
computers get encrypted and you can no longer use them, and your computers refuse to boot, your servers are dead, and your entire network has gone down right in front of your face. You see the black screen or blue screen or whatever. I think that the psychological impact is something that somehow people feel that it is
It's a
material.
bigger
Yes,
offense
that
compared
we
to
treat it
some other
differently.
So,
offense.
Yeah.
yeah. So, Sajeev and Sachin here, worm GPT or voice phishing and deepfakes, as you said, is increasingly becoming a attack vector, to get the
Exactly.
initial credentials. Is there a way really that we see amongst the tool sets that we have to, like Sachin, you said that human, and I wouldn't call them stupid, but human is the next frontier or next perimeter, right?
I mean,
So,
that
is
was
there
just a
something
sorry,
that we
that was
do?
just a vernacular inside joke. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But that's
Samir,
what I'm saying.
answering your
So,
question,
yeah, Sajeev, go
Samir,
ahead.
I understand where you're coming from. I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from. And typically answering your question, like as I mentioned, like for each of the, each of the chain component, there is like obviously where is attack, there is defense, right? So while
Yeah.
Sachin would be wanting to, punch a hole, I would want to defend the hole, right? So typically for each of the component, of course, we are playing the role here and we would be playing alternate roles in different organizations. So typically what we
Sure.
are trying to bring out here is, now you mentioned about phishing, you mentioned about
Voice
dark
phishing
web.
or spear
So
phishing. Yeah.
all this starts with something called a social engineering attack. Right. So
Correct.
if you are able to have dark web monitoring, like a defensive, just like an attack strategy would want to go into dark web, look at things, look at what is available, look at CVEs that can be exploited, look at exploits that can be used, right? Similarly, a defensive mechanism would be monitoring the dark web, right? To look
Mhm.
at whether your organization is at risk. Is there negative chatters going on? Is there somebody who has posted credentials which have been harvested from your organization? Also, you talk about also as a part of phishing attacks. Typically, what I also see is that one of the first stages to that is to create something where you harvest credentials, where you talk
Correct.
about social engineering, like the methodologies don't per se change. The method, the way it is executed may have changed to because of AI. The methodology per se does not change. So here we are talking about, say, somebody is talking about dark web. You're talking about dark web monitoring. Somebody is talking about phishing attacks. So first, maybe there would be places where people would want to harvest credentials, want to use that to then infiltrate into, then do a lateral movement. But here, for each of these chains, there are basics. So first of all, you start with a basic assessment. What is your security posture? What is that you want to defend against? Then based on that, you create a proper architecture. Do I need firewalls? Do I need, IPS? Do I need IDS? Do I need, EDRs? Do I need DLP? Do I need PAM? So multiple of these things come into place. So specifically talking about, can I say protects against the dark web or a social engineering? Training comes into perspective here. Training your resources, training your people. I'll give an example without naming the organization. There was a
Yeah.
situation where I was working with an org, and particularly there was a scenario where we were audited by a third party, and there was a third party attack simulation which was we had contracted for. So
Mm.
we had trained the entire team, and there was and the most vulnerable teams are who are caught by the people who are more desperate, say for example the sales team, the accounts team, right? People in billing, so they are not typically technical people in the words of sense of the word. So typically the attacker tries to attack them, right? He tries to identify salespeople, pose as an friend of the organization, reach out to them and say, hey, you will lose business if you don't do this XYZ, right? That's the simplest form of attack, right? Where then you use harsh words saying that, okay, I'll make sure you are blacklisted if you are not participating in this survey. And that could be a link to a malware which could download, harvest credentials, could be used to, attack, launch a second phase of attack, and so on. So if the basics are in place, where people are trained not to entertain, connectivity or from people whom they know don't know if it has not come through official channels, uh, ability to cross check with the right people. If you get a mail from your boss saying, please send these documents immediately, you say there is no reason why you should be asking for these documents. Pick up the phone, even if he's the CEO, and ask, Mr. CEO, should I be sharing this data? So these are basics which go into training when it comes to social engineering attack. When we are talking about dark web monitoring, when we are talking about brand protection, we are talking about monitoring the same environment which a hacker would monitor to harvest those information. And we are talking about the same mechanism being used the other way around. So everything which is used in the attack can be defended against, provided we follow the basics. The security poster has been clearly defined, the architecture has been properly laid, because there are a lot of people who don't use WAF. Like, you need WAF, but you have not used the WAF. You need firewall basics. People say, oh, no, I will do with access list. That's good enough if I'm, say, on a AWS or Azure environment, right? So these are things which really, I feel the real hindrance to security is not the lack of availability of resources. It is a confidence that, we don't need it. And
Correct.
that is changing. And that is changing thanks to AI. That is changing because the boy next door can be the next hacker.
So that's interesting, Sajid. So, social engineering is one part, but now DDoS, and this is one of the examples where, DDoS was executed not in a traditional manner where you deny a server with a lot of invalid requests or garbage data, but these are valid requests apparently from valid users adding a lot of things to the cart. And the sales guys at the e-com company would have been very happy saying that, oh, I am suddenly seeing a huge spike in sales. And this could be done near an event, near your big $1 billion sale or something like that. And but in reality, those carts never convert, but they are keeping the server busy and hence forcing a DDoS. Now, these are the things which AI makes it faster, but to implement. But you're right; these are thinking that how we can execute this. Is there a way to stop these kind of attacks, where they are targeted at the servers at the data center?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, security is not one product. Security is a philosophy. So, anybody who thinks that I can just do a master's and do security does not come that way. Security is about following a process, following a philosophy. So, when you have gone through the complete 9 yards of security, all of those aspects get covered. Now, answering your specific question, if somebody is trying to create a DDoS using a pattern which looks like a normal user, this is where AI can also be used, or ML can be used to look at patterns to see what is the behavior. This is not a typical behavior that I see, right? It looks very close to what a normal user would be, but this is not the behavior from these type of users. So that is something which can be used. Secondly, you can look at threat intel, which comes in from various aspects. As I said, security does not work standalone. It works in collaboration with various parts of the environment. So here you're talking about threat intel coming in from both organized and unorganized sources. So when I say organized or unorganized sources, like Sachin mentioned, like agencies like where he was working, does a proactive, or what we known as a covert way of studying what could be an attack, and we do get receive feeds from such agencies as well, right? Both officially and in unofficial ways, and also organizations who have been continuously working with, say, different types of environments do get those hints, do get those threat intel, and we are able to then put it across various devices. Like,
So,
security is no longer only about putting devices, but also configuring them. Yeah, Sachin, please go on.
I just wanted to, for the benefit of the audience, I believe that a large
Sure.
portion of the audience here is comprised of Indian institutions and their representatives,
Yeah.
although we do have global presence. So in India, now this is not something that's well known outside of the tier one banks, but this is something that's
Correct.
available to everyone should they choose to participate. So the Indian Security Establishment has an agency called NTRO, which is a National Technical Research Organization. It's the India's technical intelligence agency equivalent to the US NSA. Now, within the NTRO, they have a nodal agency for critical infrastructure protection called NCIIPC, which is National Center for Information Infrastructure Protection Center. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not have heard of it, but it exists and it's very effective. And some of the intelligence that Sajeev alluded to, which comes from more covert sources, actually is available to regular organizations in the critical infrastructure sector. Banking is one of them, energy is another, telco is another. But pretty much anyone who requests for it, the government wants to protect everyone because protecting everyone is the mission. Because if somebody wants to harm India's interests today, the battles are not going to be fought on land or even air. They are going to be fought in cyberspace and in the electronic domain. And the best way to harm the country is to harm its infrastructure, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a bank, big or small. So NCIIPC is the agency that you need to contact. They are based in New Delhi and they have representatives for different critical infrastructure sectors. Banking will have its own representative. You can reach out to me. I will point you to the person that is responsible for banking and you can ask them how you can participate. So, of course, it has its there is a flip side to it that if you decide to participate, they will expect
You
something
need
quid
to.
pro quo, meaning that they will have certain requirements you will have to meet from a security controls perspective. So
Right.
you will
Absolutely.
inherit a yet another regulator, unfortunately. But yes, so
So
you will have
similar is the case. Similar is the case, Sachin, with the triple C program of certain,
Correct.
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So you have
Yes.
cybercrime
But
control.
certain
There are
is more
various
something.
agencies, but as you
Uh,
rightly
uh,
mentioned, it's a double-edged sword.
right.
It
Yeah.
also means that you comply to all the standards, you
It
comply
does.
to all the requirements.
I personally know the National Cybersecurity Coordinator, who was previously the Director General of the NCIIPC. His name is Naveen Singh. He's a very, very amazing person, very qualified, very capable. He's an IIT Kanpur gold medalist. He is now India's National Cybersecurity Coordinator. He's a technocrat that leads the cybersecurity for the country. Now, I can tell you that based on my experience with both CERTIN and NCIIPC, the quality of intelligence and the level of detail and actionability of that intelligence that NCIIPC is able to provide far surpasses what CERTIN has ever been able to provide historically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there
So
equivalent of
Uh,
this? Are there equivalents of this in other regions that you're aware of, Sachin?
yes,
And
yes. So
yeah.
in Singapore, for example, you have the Cybersecurity Agency, which has
Cyber.
defined 13 critical infrastructure sectors. You have MAS, which is the financial regulator equivalent of
Okay.
RBI. And what happens is CSA, although it is a regulator, it is like NCIIPC, but they don't act directly, they act through the sectoral regulator. So they act through MAS for enacting for providing intelligence on financial crime and financial threats and they'll act through respective sectoral regulators like power, telecom, and so on. Like there's IMDA for telecom in Singapore. So they don't directly interact. In this case, NCIPC directly interacts with the regulated entities. So they will directly interact with ICICI Bank, with HDFC Bank, and whoever else that they have designated as national critical infrastructure. So there is two-step process. You have to first get yourself notified as or designated as national critical infrastructure. With it, then you then start to reap the benefits of your association with NCIPC in terms of intel and so on.
Sure. So that's great. So I am going to now, Sachin, ask you to share something on what's scaring the world a lot. Quantum security, right? Everyone has started believing that with quantum
Hmm.
computers and computing going through the roof, there is suddenly going to be algorithms broken. AES 256, 512, whatever you do will be broken in 5-7 minutes, and that quantum is going to completely overtake the world.
Mm.
Your views, how true is this scare, and to what extent do we need to run and immediately implement quantum security?
Okay, so this is one of the hardest and the easiest questions to answer simultaneously. Okay, and
Okay.
I'll explain why, right? First of all, the physics and computer science behind quantum computing is fairly complex, right? It is fundamentally different than the way we use our computers today, traditional classical computers as we call them, which is based on this concept called universal Turing machine. So, but just to summarize, in a classical world, in the world that we inhabit and we see and touch and feel, and the computers we use today, we all know that we have two bits, we have two states, 0 and 1, true or false, Boolean logic, right? So everything is represented as true or false and combinations of true and falses. So you have everything that from A to Z and 1 to zeros and 0 to 9 and all these numbers and characters all represented as binary bits, right? So the keyword is binary, right? And and so when you perform a computation in our classical world, like multiply two numbers together, you have a finite number of steps and you always arrive at a result. When you want to compute
Continue.
3, as long as you have the time and space and computing power, you will be able to calculate 2 times 3 is 6, and using the algorithm that you will use, right? Okay, in quantum world is all very different. First of all, there is no 0 and 1. There is 0, 1, and there is simultaneously 0 and 1. Which starts to get very esoteric and complex. So basically, you can have two states simultaneously coexisting.
Same time.
And this allows you to harness
Okay.
the power of parallelism, right? So we call it quantum superposition of states. Now, what
Super
happens as a
positive.
result, just to demystify this, is that you're able to perform computations much faster and exponentially faster than ever possible using a normal computer. Now, the caveat here is, or the devil is in the details, it's not all computations can be performed faster. In fact, some computations are actually slower on a quantum computer.
Slower than
But certain classes of mathematical problems can be solved much faster, especially those problems we call NP hard or non-polynomial hard. Now, these are classes of problems which, if the problem is of a certain size, it may take a few trillion years to calculate the answer using a normal computer with the fastest supercomputer available today. And one example of such a problem is the mathematics underlying RSA, the encryption scheme we all use today. The reason why we use it with high confidence is because we know that even if we use the world's fastest supercomputers, if you do not have the key and if you wanted to decrypt the traffic, it would take you trillions and trillions of years, which is what gives you the confidence. And then you say we're not saying it's impossible. It is called an intractable problem because it takes a very, very, very long time. And by that time, the universe might not exist. So therefore, we are safe, right? Now, this assumption, this confidence we have is shaken because in 1994, as long back as 30 years ago, Peter Shor, one of the famous mathematicians, came up with an algorithm on a theoretical computer, which he called a quantum computer, and said that if you build a quantum computer one day of a sufficient size and complexity and stability, you will be able to compute the underlying mathematics behind RSA in a very short period of time, potentially even minutes or hours. But again, the devil is in the detail. He said, as long as it is big enough,
as long
powerful enough, and
big enough.
stable enough. Because quantum computers are inherently unstable. You have to cool them down to near sub-zero, I mean, to near 0 degree Kelvin temperatures to
Yeah,
make them,
absolutely.
right? And to make sure there are no errors in the computation. The second thing that he did not tell you is it is a non-deterministic computation, meaning you might wait for a year, but you might never actually get an answer. And whichever answer you get might be a probabilistic answer. So it'll never be a fully deterministic answer with 100% certainty. So the quantum computer is likely to say, by the way, the decryption of this encrypted traffic is expected to be or likely to be A, B, C, D, E with a confidence of maybe 0.75, in a probability of 0.75. So there are lots of catches and gotchas there, right? And remember, the most important thing is it has to be big enough, stable enough, and complex enough to compute that value. Now, you talked about AES in passing. AES does not suffer from the same risk. That's because of the
Correct.
underlying mathematics of AES is different. Okay, the underlying mathematics of RSA is something called prime factorization, factoring large numbers into the prime factors. And that is the problem that is impossible to reverse unless you have trillions of years to spare. AES works in a very different way. It's a block cipher system. It's not a data in transit encryption algorithm. And the simple way let's assume that somehow you build a quantum computer powerful enough to decrypt AES traffic using a different algorithm, not Peter Shor. It is called Grover's algorithm. All you have to do is double the number of bits, and suddenly you are safe again. In the case of RSA, however, the smaller the bit size of the key, for example, if you have a 2048-bit RSA or a 392-bit ECC, ECC is also, elliptic curve is also vulnerable. Smaller the size of the key, the more vulnerable it is to quantum attacks. So which means that ECC algorithm, which was actually more secure from the classical perspective, is actually more vulnerable from the quantum computing perspective. So a lot of vendors, industry participants, researchers that want more money for funding for their own research in quantum computing and quantum cryptography, they are heavily promoting the idea, the narrative that quantum computing attacks or quantum attacks on crypto systems are inevitable, imminent, and it's something that's going to happen in the next few years, which is simply not true. If you look at the current state of the art in quantum computing, in terms of, first of all, there's a problem that only a few companies in the world have even created quantum computers, and those are in the hands
Exactly.
of Hitachi and Google and IBM and so on and so forth, and Meta and so on and so forth. These quantum computers are nowhere close. The most conservative estimates state that it'll be another 10 years before you can actually do a proof of concept RSA encryption break. You can break RSA encryption. It'll take a decade. Some estimates say 5 years, but remember, this is proof of concept under laboratory conditions by a single quantum computer, which is billions of dollars in cost, owned by one company, or maybe two companies or three companies. For this to become a real threat, it has to that computing resource must be made available to the threat actors, and more or less a commodity, so that it's cost effective for the threat actors to perform. Can you imagine? Let's assume that there's a bank worth, let's say, 100 million US dollars, and you're spending $1 billion to do an attack, which may or may not succeed because it doesn't
Correct.
work.
So Sachin, to
Or
kind of really sum up what you're saying is, while in theory quantum can do what it can do,
really,
are we
absolutely,
really,
yeah,
are
yeah.
we really saying that immediately in the next 2, 3 years you don't see RSA algorithms or data at rest at threat, but what you do see is potentially AES based algorithms on data in transit could potentially be at
No,
risk,
the other
and
way
you.
around. Sorry, RSA data in
Other
transit.
way around.
Yeah.
The other way around.
Okay,
Not
here's what I'm
AES.
saying. Let me sum it up. So,
Yeah,
am I trivializing the threat? Absolutely not. The threat is real.
yeah,
Okay. How imminent is it? How soon is too soon is something that we need to be very realistic about, right?
yeah.
Most organizations in this room today, right?
Hmm.
I would not call it an imminent existential threat. Okay.
Right.
But does it mean that they should not do anything? No. If you are a large enough organization where you feel targeted enough, and you are national critical infrastructure, if you're tier one, tier two bank, or you're a tier one, tier two telco, or you're a government or defense or a military agency performing very sensitive functions for the country, in such cases, you must undertake what we call quantum readiness assessment to ensure that when that threat actually becomes imminent and existential, you are well prepared to take the actions quickly, and you're not reacting to the situation 5 years later. So certainly
Sure.
you must be doing something. So what I have advised some of my banking clients to do is to set up a task force internally, right? And perhaps in collaboration with one of their existing, maybe big four, or maybe somebody like ESDS here, who can assist you. And then undertake an exercise to look at your existing systems of cryptography, look at your existing firewalls, look at your existing web application, all of your web servers and protocols that are in use. Where are you using TLS and RSA, basically, right? And they were surprised to find that they are actually 50% quantum ready already. Because if you look at
Hmm.
some of the recent technologies, they are quantum safe. Meaning, what does it mean to be quantum safe? NIST in America have approved certain set of digital signature algorithms and a new breed of encryption algorithms to replace RSA and DSA, the digital signature algorithm, and the RSA, which is the encryption algorithm, which are supposed to be quantum resilient, meaning that even if you use a quantum computer, those algorithms are fundamentally different in the mathematics and therefore are not vulnerable to quantum attacks. And many of the large companies like Cisco and Palo Alto and Microsoft have already implemented protocols which can be turned on inside their technologies like firewalls and so on, and suddenly you become quantum safe. But picture is not as simple as that, because when you talk about communication or data in transit, you have 2 points, A and B, communicating with each other. It's not possible simply for A to turn on the switch and B not to turn on the switch, because then it will do a downgrade and then will communicate at a more insecure layer. So if one bank has turned on the quantum safe switch and the other side has not, then they will negotiate a more insecure way of communication, and ultimately it will be a false sense of security. So that is the reason why it will take a longer
So,
time
so,
for
so
everyone to
yeah.
become
So
quantum safe.
Sachin, to sum up, yeah, yeah. So Sachin, to sum up, I'm going to say that it is a risk. It may or may not be imminent. Be prepared for it. Do an assessment.
Yes.
Don't press your panic buttons and go investing millions of dollars in it right now. Right?
Right,
Okay.
right.
So we are at a near fag end of of our session, and I'm going to ask both of you a few questions in rapid fire. I need
Sure.
what first comes to your mind, ideally in a sentence or two, to respond to this. Okay, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. So the first one, passwordless future, myth or reality? Everyone seems to believe biometrics are coming, or in some form something is coming, but passwords are going away. True or false?
True. True, from my perspective, because
Okay, Sachin? Yeah, Sachin.
basically, if you
Yeah,
see, even
Sachin, go ahead.
RBI has mandated, a lot of the regulators are also mandating what is known as behavioral biometrics. So biometrics is coming in, behavioral biometrics is coming in, and this is not something which is a new concept. And also a passwordless world is also not a new concept. There have been people in secret exploring this over a period of time, especially a lot of larger banks have been exploring this over a period of time, because passwords at the end of the day is where you could be hacked. Like if you are going to be able to say Samir logs in, and not only based on your username password, but based on a lot of other characteristics, if I'm able to say welcome Mr. Samir, right? And Samir is not logged in at all, right? He just works in. So this is typically what happens in real world, right? You do not come in and say, "Hey, I am Samir. This is my password. Let me through." Right? We are able to recognize you based on your body characteristics, the way you talk, the way you look. So similarly, I feel that's a reality, and it will not become a reality for everybody immediately. Like Sachin mentioned, everything is not going to happen in one day. Rome was never built in a day. But again, for mission critical organizations, it would start maybe very soon. And for the larger world, it may take some more time, but yes, it's a reality.
My take on this is that I agree
Next one.
with Sajeev.
Yeah, yeah,
It is
Sachin.
it is a
Yeah.
reality. However, it does not change much. I'll tell you why. If like you mentioned, Sajeev, that passwordless systems are not new, right? It is a new
Right.
paradigm the narrative that's being, again, the industry is driving this because they want to sell new solutions which are passwordless or the new schemes. But for example, as early as 30 years ago, when you look at Linux systems, when you did an SSH from one machine to another machine, you had the option always, right? You could have an explicit username or password, or you could have a secret, a key, right? Key-based authentication. So essentially, even if you don't use a password, there has to be an underlying secret that needs to be managed, stored, secured, and so on. If somebody gets to the underlying secret, you are still compromised.
So the
Key-based
next one. So AI in SOC, and blessing or chaos. Because what I mean here
I
is
would, it's a
that
double-edged sword.
given that you're
I would say
implementing
it's a
AI
double-edged sword.
everywhere, sorry,
I would say it is
sorry.
Yeah.
The question is that
asymptotically a
given that
blessing.
you're implementing AI everywhere,
You are supposed to ask
yeah,
the question.
blessing.
We are
Okay,
supposed to
cool.
answer, right? Okay. So definitely a blessing, but
The
not
excitement
until
is building, Sachin.
one line answer. Definitely a blessing, but not
One
until
line
you get
answers. Now, one line answers
not
only.
until you get to the chaos first. It will get worse before you get.
Okay,
Even I
good.
agree with
Yes.
that. I agree with that. It is a blessing provided you have the basics in place and you are using it as an over above and above that, and it's not only being used for that. Yeah.
Correct. Cyber insurance. Everyone seems to believe that now that I have cyber insurance, I don't need to invest too much in my infrastructure. So cyber insurance, is it a solution or is it an illusion?
It's an illusion. I will say it is not an illusion. It is like you're trying to transfer your risk by saying that I have an insurance policy. But does that mean that, just because you have an insurance policy, you would go and drink tons of alcohol and say, I'm insured? No, right? That is real. So similarly, there are two parts to it. One, cyber insurance companies itself would be looking at what have you done to ensure security,
That's right, Sajid. I was
just
about
like
to
your
bring
health
that up. Yeah.
insurance premium. Yeah. So it is a two-way sword.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sachin?
it's not a solution. It's neither an illusion. But having said that, it would probably prompt you to have a safer security environment by ensuring that you follow all the security norms, because the insurer will ask you to do that.
So I don't have anything to add.
Samir, over to you. I think
Yes.
Samir has freezed.
Yeah, some network issue. There he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next one, last one. One cyber myth in AI that in your view must die. Sachin and Sajeev both.
To me, okay, it's very clear in my mind that there are proponents of what we call strong AI hypotheses. Strong AI says that AI will one day replace consciousness, intuition, reasoning, human reasoning, and so on. I don't believe that. I believe that consciousness, and there's a bit of a philosophical point which is borne out by mathematics. If you want, you can read the book of Roger Penrose, a very eminent mathematician. So essentially, consciousness, reasoning, intuition, everything that makes us human is essentially, according to him, and I believe that wholeheartedly, is essentially what we call non-algorithmic. It is something that cannot be implemented or manifest as a program, whether it is AI or otherwise. After all, AI is also a program, right? It is also something that the humans build. So that's a fascinating book. I will post the link somewhere in later. But that's a myth, I think, and that is something that is being promoted as a cure for all evil. And that's a fatal mistake to make, because you will still need the human in the loop to support, and as long as you use artificial intelligence as to leverage artificial intelligence as a tool, one yet a very effective tool that increases scale and sophistication in what you do, both from adversary and from a defender's perspective, I think that is okay, that is safe. But the moment you start to believe anything beyond that, that's when you get into dangerous territory, because you might end up relying too much on artificial intelligence and then getting disillusioned after a while.
I agree
Okay.
with Sachin here. I would just want to add a point here, saying that the naysayers or the doomsday predictors saying that AI would take over, I don't believe that, because the AI will still need to be validated. Everybody will be having his own version of AI. At the end of the day, they are just algorithms, right? They are mathematics in action, right? And there would be flips and sides to algorithms which will need to be understood over a period of time. Just like medicines are not truly effective, or you do not know whether the medicine is effective or not unless you have studied it for over a period of time. Similarly, each AI algorithm needs to be tested with time. So there is nothing that AI would take over the world. It would probably be a revolution. It would be a very good tool, and yes, it would disrupt a lot of things that we do. But yes, it is not going to be a doomsday for mankind or for people
I
like
would,
us.
I probably will change my stance just a little bit here. I would say that if AI does cause an apocalypse, it will not be AI's fault.
Correct. Absolutely. I agree
It
with
will
you
be a,
there.
it will be a, there will be a human factor. It is because of our blind belief or our lack of ability to govern AI that might cause an
Absolutely.
apocalypse. I don't think you can blame AI for it.
Perfect. So
Exactly. Exactly.
that brings us to the end of this session. I am going to ask Shirish to open up questions. Anyone has a question, you can simply raise hand and ask the question to the forum, or type out your queries in the chat, and the group will be happy to answer them. So either you can put it in the chat or just raise your hand, and we'll unmute you to ask the question. Either is okay.
So guys, we'll wait for another 1 or 2 minutes to take questions from you. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat box, or you can just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Yeah, we have one question from Ratnesh Ramdev.
So the question is that, is a model theft possible, or entire LLM model can be replaced? And we have heard of model injection, but is there a threat of a model being hijacked?
Yes, absolutely. So it's I see it's one of the parts of the earlier question. So the prompt injection, data poisoning, and model theft. All these three are viable attack techniques, which is why initially I said that I wouldn't be surprised if MITRE organization publishes a new framework for AI. So here's the thing: we need to make a distinction. One way to look at artificial intelligence is how it aids attackers. That's one aspect of AI security. The other aspect, and a more traditional aspect of what we call AI security, is when the artificial intelligence models or the AI framework, which is implemented in an organization itself, is attacked. Right? So we are talking now about the latter. Right? So when you talk about prompt injection, so prompt injection is a technique where you're able to craft certain prompts which you provide the LLM through a chatbot interface, which either confuses or allows you to bypass or evade some of the guardrails that have been placed on the LLM to respond to or not respond to certain type of questions in a certain way. So if you're able to defeat some of those guardrails through prompt injection attacks by cleverly crafted series of prompts, which allow you to somehow subvert that guardrail technology that is in place, you are then able to achieve. Now, one of the practical examples of this was in a recent attack, which Anthropic against Cloud LLM, where Anthropic identified the world's first, well, it may not be the world's first, but it is the first one that they identified as a full kill chain, which was executed and aided by Claude. So Claude was used to generate malware, which was outside of the scope of this Claude code generator. It was not designed specifically not to respond to any request to generate malware, but through a series of very specially crafted prompts, it was able to design malware, which was then used in actual operations, and then agentic AI was used to chain all the stages of the operation together. So there's an excellent white paper on this by Anthropic, which describes this, and it was well publicized. Sanjay, I'm sure you may have read it before. Samir, you may have read about it before.
100%.
Yes.
So, well, extension of that is model theft. If an attacker is able to attack your AI infrastructure where you store your models in your model repository, many organizations now have this bring your own model concept where you have, let's say, you have a detection tool like Palo Alto Cortex XIM, which supports bring your own model, BYOM, and the organizations create their own models or purchase a model that they have developed by a third party. And now, if that model is replaced or poisoned, or its guardrails have been manipulated, then of course the attackers can weaponize that model against the organization. So an example of this is in modern healthcare systems. Diagnostics often uses AI. For example, the image I showed earlier. For example, you could have imagine a system where you have diagnosis aided by AI, where the scans are analyzed by AI in addition to the doctors, and the triage is done by the AI before it goes to the doctors. Now, if that model is poisoned, it could potentially give a wrong diagnosis, and the triage results could be wrong and potentially leading to a misdiagnosis of the patient. Now, that's one example in the healthcare sector. So, but yes, model theft is definitely a possibility. There have been instances of.
Just add to that, Sachin, to add to that, yes, I do agree that model theft is also very much possible. And the only way, like you also effectively mentioned, the way to take care of it is to have a MITRE framework, which talks about AI. Just like you have a vulnerability assessment for non-AI workloads, or you talk about any application, you have something like a vulnerability assessment. A vulnerability assessment for AI is something which would evolve, I believe, very soon. So that is something which will probably be taken care of as the popularity of AI grows. That is something which will have to happen. And anything where we are, and typically the way I would look at it, the question where people would be concerned would be not a publicly open AI, but be something which is built for the organization. Something like an SLM built for yourself, which obviously would have to have all the checks and balances built in, and those, an assessment done internally, not only to check whether the source code could be accessed or whether it could be stolen in another way. Also, prompt engineering, whether it will be able to do that. That is something a pen tester will have to do now from an AI perspective, over and above what he was doing in the non-AI world.
Yes.
Okay. So
There's
one more
one
question that we
on,
have is why is it hard to detect the media? I think we answered that, but I think there is a question which saying why is it so there was one more which says that the practical challenge of integrating AI with existing SIEM and firewall systems, that does it require a complete overhaul or you can just do it a bolt on?
No, now I'm currently working with several organizations where I'm advising them on their security operations transformation journeys, which is basically a fancy term to say that they're upgrading from a traditional correlation rules-based QRadar-like platform to a next generation SIM like Google SecOps or Palo Alto Cortex XIM or CrowdStrike LogScale. So these are AI-enabled SIM platforms, right? So what does it mean to say AI-enabled? So again, two things. One is the use of AI to aid analysts make better sense of the signals that they're seeing from the environment, right? The alerts and the incidents that come up, and making better sense of them, being able to triage faster, investigate faster, and respond faster. Essentially to reduce the detection lifecycle, MTTD, MTTR, all of these SOC metrics that people track. The other part of AI in these systems, in these modern SIMs, is in the correlation and detection. So the ability to look at vast amounts of data, sensor data, through myriad sources, and then piece together different elements of what they're seeing to create a more rich picture, contextual picture, and then saying, okay, by the way, what all of this is telling me is that this attack is taking place, or this attack has taken place, and these are the indicators of the attack. So going beyond traditional IOC based detection to a more nuanced behavioral detection. So this is where the AI is being used. Unfortunately, it's not something you can bolt on to an existing SIM, because it is now, to a certain extent, perhaps you can bolt on a copilot for possibly, but for the detection side of things, it needs all the way from the ingestion to the detection has to be inside the same platform. So Nikesh Arora from Palo Alto says he calls it the platform story. So it's not just that he insists that you guys use Palo Alto technology for SIM. He says that you will get the best results if you use Palo Alto's firewalls, Palo Alto's SOAR platform, Palo Alto's cloud CSPM tools, and Palo Alto's proxy solutions, because that is where all of the sensor data will be in a normalized format, which complies with their data model. And you can then use his 2000 plus detectors, or ML models, as he calls them, to actually make sense of the data. So no, you cannot, I don't think you can do it very simply, but maybe Sajeev has a better perspective on it because he runs a very large organization that does managed services.
Thanks for that, Sachin, and thanks for the insight. If you have to look at, is it difficult to integrate? At the end of the day, when we say integrating with AI, already there are products, already there are SIMs which have integrated some amount of ML, some amount of behavioral analytics into the platform already. So that is already there. So when we are talking about integrating, it is more of integrating prompt engineering, as Sachin mentioned, right? You could have prompts, or you could have an LLM or an SLM integrated with your existing environments, where you could query about the health, and you could use the data and the logs, which could be analyzed further to what the, if you have a non-standard SIM, or if you don't have an AI-enabled SIM, and you are looking at something, you could already either build it yourself using AI itself, right? Where you could say, I have all the data and I could write queries to correlate all of these. Or I don't think it is very difficult to integrate, but the basics will not be avoided. You still need to collect the logs. You will still need to have the, sensors at the right checkpoints. And yes, the way it is presented to you, the way it is correlated, can always evolve. And I don't believe that it has to be all from one, because I don't believe that this is proprietary. Most of the integrations should be possible. And the reason why AI had to come, and the reason why you see a lot of disruption happening today, is because there was no democratization. So I feel AI is democratizing all the way we are working. And I don't think we need to buy everything from one box. Such in
Yeah,
my
Sure.
view here.
I mean,
So,
yeah, I mean, that is his story, right? I mean, that he wants to sell and increase revenue
Of
for.
course, of course,
It is
of
also
course.
Google's story and all the large companies that have the wherewithal to have
Absolutely.
products already,
Absolutely.
so
right?
there are a lot of questions coming on. Is it possible to detect? Uh,
I have an answer for that. That's why I want
yeah,
to tell you. Okay, this
sure.
answer is not all good news though.
Yeah.
Okay, and the answer changes every minute we spend pondering over the answer, because there are advances that are happening very rapidly. So first of all, so first of all, why is I'll tell you, AI manipulated content today, maybe not 1 year ago, but today is extremely hard to detect. Okay. First of all, there's no watermarks. There's no standard technique. Nobody has agreed on a common standard or a framework for AI watermarks, or something that says it's a purely voluntary. If you want, you can add. Social media companies are also not really keen on implementing that. I mean, the governments are pressuring them, but they are not, because of child pornography and other sinister reasons. There is some pressure on these social media companies. But you see, uh, the detection model, in social media context, which is what I think the question alludes to, is when we see content on social media, for example, how do we know it is real, not real? The problem is that in the original file, there are certain forensic artifacts that if you are technical enough and you had the right tools to analyze the image file or the media file, image file is easier, but the media files are even more harder. The problem with social media is social media doesn't present a file in its original format. Okay, so social media does compression, it does reposting, and all of the platform pipelines that are involved in taking your content and presenting it on somebody's Instagram profile or a screen. It transforms the image irrevocably, and all the forensic artifacts are lost. So any indications that it could, you based on the analysis of those artifacts, you could tell, oh, by the way, this could have been generated by an AI nano banana, for example. Those are already irrevocably lost. It's like a crime scene where somebody has trampled all over or taken picture of a picture of a picture, and now the third picture is being presented as evidence in the court of law. You're not going to admit that as evidence because it has lost all its forensic value, and that is the main problem. Other than that, of course, there are other technical issues, nuances, which I think will take too long to describe in this. If you want, Samir, I can send a response back which Shirish can send to the participant, and that will give you a pretty good rundown on why it is not good news, and it'll continue to be bad news in the future. Yeah, Samir, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So I think that's an interesting view, Sachin, and I think we should publish a separate paper on
I think so.
the
Absolutely.
advances and the possibilities of detecting deepfakes and AI generated content, because you're right, it is important from social media standpoint in creating opinions in phishing and spear phishing attacks. So if there is a way, and what can be done, when do we see a light at the end of the tunnel if we are today to dive, could be an interesting, maybe a next webinar or next session. But it's our time. It's 4:30. We have had an extremely great audience who have patiently listened to our sometimes ramblings, but hopefully mostly insights for over 1.5 hours. In the age of AI and Instagram, it is tough to hold anyone's attention beyond a minute, I was told. So I think we did a great job at holding them for 1.5 hours. But thank you, audiences, and Sachin has shared his number, his contacts. But if you have any questions from anyone in the forum, Sachin, Sajeev, me, just feel free to send out a query. You will get a form, and you will get a feedback form as well as a query form after this. Feel free to send any questions, and we'll do our best to respond to everything.
Should we now reveal that we are all AI avatars and we are actually never begin with?
I was
Yes,
about to
we
say
can.
that.
We can.
We are all
We can.
AI,
We are.
and all of this was an AI presentation.
Absolutely. I am Claude.
Absolutely.
Sachin's actually Anthropic, and Sajiv's Google. So we are actually AI avatars. Interesting. Thank you, everyone, and thanks
Thank
to
you.
the forum for making it interesting. Thank you.
Samir, can we sit on
Thanks
for the
everyone
next
for your
5 minutes
patience.
after the call?
Sure. Yeah,
Same to you.
absolutely.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Thank you.